Nicolas Cage is an interesting specimen of an actor, isn't he? Sometimes he can give us groundbreaking Academy Award-winning performances that leave grown men in tears, changing lives. And then he can see a film so bad and somehow make it watchable and strangely entertaining by how over the top he is. Whichever one it may be this week, Nicolas Cage time is always guaranteed to be a fun experience. So today, we're looking at 25 interesting facts about Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage was born on January the 7th, 1964 in Long Beach, California, but what might surprise you is that his real name is actually Nicholas Kim Coppola. That's right, his uncle is legendary filmmaker Francis Ford himself. He decided to change his name to try to find his own identity and not just leech off of his uncle's Godfather fame, and he came up with Nicolas Cage based off of the comic book character Luke Cage. He's actually a huge comic book fan, which then leads us to, at the age of 41, Nicolas Cage and his wife at the time, Alice, gave birth to their son on October the 3rd, 2005. This was Cage's second child, but due to his love of comic books, they actually named their boy after Superman himself, Kal-El. On a less than flattering fact, Cage actually proposed to actress Patricia Arquette on the very day he first met her in the early 1980s. Understandably, Arquette was weirded out but thought that he was joking, so she played along for pure banter. Patricia even came up with a sarcastic list of demands they would have to abide by in order to win her over. However, Cage actually began working through this list, which led to Arquette being so freaked out she actually avoided him for many years. However, some down the line, they met back up and actually ended up getting married for realsies in 1995, lasting 6 years together. Speaking of which, Nicolas Cage has been married 3 times. Arquette was his first, followed by Lisa Maria Presley, yes, the actual daughter of Elvis. Extra fact for free, Cage was a massive fan of her father, so I guess that was an honour. Unfortunately, this marriage was very short-lived, tying the knot on August the 10th, 2002, and filing for divorce on November the 25th that same year. The divorce wasn't even finalised until May the 16th, 2004. Their divorce proceedings lasted longer than their marriage. And finally, the actor then got hitched with Alice Kim on July the 30th, 2004, just 2 months after the last divorce was finalised, but they would unfortunately go their separate ways in January of 2016. Keeping up with the same theme, Cage openly stated that him marrying Lisa Presley was a complete mistake in the first place and it should never have happened. Ouch. Nicolas Cage studied at Beverly Hills High School, a school that also saw the likes of Angelina Jolie, Michael Klesick, Lenny Kravitz, David Schwimmer, Jonathan Silverman, Gina Gershon, Rhonda Fleming, Jackie Cooper, Rob Reiner, Antonio Sabato Jr., Pauly Shore, Michael Tolkien, Betty White, Corbin Burnson, Elizabeth Daily, Albert Brooks, and Crispin Glover. That must have been one hell of a prom. Although he dropped out of that same high school at the age of just 17, he secured a small part in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, though much of his role was cut out. He had no hopes for his acting career and started selling popcorn at the Fairfax Theatre, assuming that would be the closest he will ever get. However, he managed to secure a job reading lines with actors who were trying out for Rumblefish, directed by his own uncle, which actually got him a part in that film, followed by Valley Girl that same year, finally launching his career. This was also around the time he found his niche with his acting style when he smashed a street vendor's remote control car for the rage that his character needed in 1984's The Cotton Club. Speaking of Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Cage was actually considered for Brad, but the studio found his performance too dark, so it went to Judge Reinhold instead. For Nicolas Cage too dark? Never. He was also only 17 at the time, so he couldn't work as many hours as the other actors, and this is the only film where his real name is actually credited. It was also Nicolas Cage who got Johnny Depp his first ever acting role. Depp was visiting LA with his wife at the time when he met up with Cage, who gave him the motivational push that he needed to try out for Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street. Cage is infamous for improvising on set, usually annoying his other cast members. This has also proven to be a nuisance for directors such as the Coen brothers on Raising Arizona when it got in the way of their vision and most of his ad-libs were cut out. Nicolas Cage was lined up to star in Superman Lives as the Man himself, directed by Tim Burton, and he even did fittings for the costume, but Warner Brothers pulled the plug on the project altogether. I think we can all agree that Nicolas Cage as Superman would have been amazing. Over to Marvel, however, because Nicolas Cage was actually Sam Raimi's first choice to play the Green Goblin in his first Spider-Man movie. And since we're on the topic of casting missed opportunities, Cage was also cast as the lead in 2008's The Wrestler. He even started doing professional wrestling training but backed out, believing that he wouldn't be able to bulk up in time. The role would go to Mickey Rourke, who would then go on to win a Golden Globe and be nominated for an Academy Award. In In fact, Nicolas Cage is only one of 3 actors to receive an Academy Award nomination for playing 2 characters in the same film. In 1964, Peter Sellers played numerous people in Dr. Strangelove. A year later, Lee Marvin played Charlene and Strawn in Cat Ballou, and in 2002, Nicolas Cage played both identical twins, Charlie and Donald Kaufman, in Adaptation. Lee Marvin was, however, the only one of these to actually win. Nicolas Cage has a tattoo on his upper back of a monitor lizard with a top hat. Just because. In the classic Vampire's Kiss, Nicolas Cage actually ate a real cockroach. It took 3 takes and Cage claimed every muscle in his body told him to not do it, but he decided to do it anyway. Dedication. Nicolas Cage and his cousin Sofia Coppola are the 3rd generation of Academy Award winners in their family, the other 2 being Francis Ford and his grandfather Carmina Coppola. They are actually the 2nd family to do so after Angelica Houston, John Huston, and Walter Huston. In 2011, Cage was arrested in New Orleans under alleged domestic abuse against his wife Alice and acting drunk and disorderly. $11,000 was needed to bail him out, and it was done so by none other than Dwayne Chapman. Yes, Dog the Bounty Hunter himself. The charges were soon dropped thereafter. Even though Cage played Helen Hunt's father in Peggy Sue Got Married in 1986, Cage is only 1 year younger than her. At the age of just 15, Cage tried to convince his uncle Francis Ford Coppola to give him a chance, promising him that he'll show him what real acting is. Afterwards, the reaction was met with sheer silence. Francis Ford had already directed the likes of Marlon Brando, Al Pacino, Gene Hackman, and Robert De Niro, and he wasn't particularly impressed by his nephew. His inspiration was actually James Dean. He saw him in Rebel Without a Cause and claimed nothing affected him as much as that did. It was then that he decided that that is what he wanted to do. Despite growing up in a Catholic family, he refuses to talk about religion publicly and refuses to answer any questions about it in interviews. He has, however, briefly claimed that he doesn't want to ever preach and offend anyone else's personal beliefs. 2 people that Cage claims he wishes he could work with one day are Jack Nicholson and Quentin Tarantino. Despite once being one of Hollywood's highest paid actors, earning $40 million just in 2009 alone, he owned many homes around the world, but he failed to pay $6.2 million in income tax, leading to even more debts piling up of a further $350,000. Due to this, he filed a $20 million lawsuit against his business manager, who turned it around and blamed Cage for meaningless spending on numerous cars and houses and not listening to his warnings. In order to pay off the debts, Nick started selling properties and accepting any film roles left and right, which would probably explain the Ghost Rider movies. And I just have to end it on the conspiracy theory that this photograph proves that Nicolas Cage is an actual immortal vampire from the past.
This is for Civil War, roughly 1860s. Photo was taken in Bristol, Tennessee, and a guy says that it likely is you.
Right. Well, let me say that there is a resemblance, but how can I be polite about this? It's a somewhat slowed down version of me.
The guy's theory is that you look exactly the same now, and therefore that makes you a vampire.
Right.
That's the theory.
Yeah,
that's
except there's a photograph of me, and you can't take pictures.
This is you from Moonstone.
Now, look, I don't drink blood, and last time I look in the mirror, I have a reflection, so I'm not going with his vampire theory. I'm just not going to do it.
Have you noticed how defensive Nick Cage gets in this, and just how distant he keeps avoiding eye contact and questions? I'm on to you, Cage. And that's my list. Did I miss any out? Let me know about it in the comments below, and I will see you next time.